chapters 10, 11, and 12 of Sree Krishna, the Lord of Love, by Baba Premanand Bharati. Chapter 10. Thus the childhood of Krishna was full of what were considered wonderful miracles by his family and the populace, but which to the Lord of the universe were but divinely natural. The strength of the baby hands was colossal, the beauty of the baby face was entrancing. His flesh gave forth a luster and radiance that filled a darkened room with glory. The wisdom that peered from his wondrous eyes was full of loving mystery, and the touch of his breath brought to the heart a love that was ecstasy. O babe that came to a desert of life to make it a garden of lilies and roses, O babe that brought to a weakened heart the love that conquered the world by its might, O babe that came with a light on thy brow that filled the eye like the glow of the sun, and brought on thy breath the promise of bliss which came to all those who breathed where thou dwelt. All these thou wert, yet a helpless babe in the arms of those who reared thee thou lay. And naughty thou wert, and full of mischief too, stealing the golden butter that stood in shining rows, the pride of the dairymaids, the gopis, and feeding the same to the saucy monkeys that crowded around thee to help thee in thy pranks. O wonder of love and might, incomprehensible one, thou omnipotence, who the all-pervading energy of all art, and yet with eyes aslant, didst play the child to suit thine only sweet fancy, and in the midst of men didst come to teach men love, and save the world that was steeped in sin. Thou who wert Lord of the Lords of Yoga, this thy Yoga power did startle the world when in it thou wert as a child. On one occasion the child became impatient and fretful because the mother failed to suckle him at his cry, and running amidst the pots and chums where she had been working the butter, he cast them down to the earth, breaking them into pieces, and dividing the sweet butter with the pets that followed the child wherever he went. The mother, on being told of his mischief, sought to punish him by tying him with a cord to the husking stand that stood nearby. The cord lacked 2 inches in its reach to the bench. More cord she sought, and fastening it end to end, found still the 2 inches missing. Cord after cord she added thereto, but she could not make the 2 ends reach. Amazed and startled, she gazed at the child, her hair disheveled, her face flushed with excitement, a great fear looking from her eye. For what was this miracle that prevented her from spanning the reach of 2 inches? The child, on seeing the troubled face of his mother, allowed himself to be fastened, and thus in disgrace he stood for a time till 2 trees in the distance attracted his eye, and walking away in the reach of the cords and drawing the husking stand behind him, he stood between 2 huge Arjuna trees, and casting the cord about the trees, he tore them up by the roots. Down they came with a crash to the ground, carrying with them all that was in their way. And lo, from the trees 2 fiery spirits appeared, and saluting the child they prayed, and disappeared in a cloud of light. For list, in the days of yore, when the saint Narada walked the earth, he passed the stream where maiden youth made merry in the waves. At the passing by of the saint, the youths failed to salute him, but instead in bold arrogance laughed and called unto him, and reverence had they none. In the heart of the saint a prayer arose, that the youths who knew not respect towards the saints that walked on earth to make men holy, should be reborn as trees, yet as trees to remember their past offense and dwell on the folly thereof. But the saint also prayed that when he who was God came on earth, he would remember the trees and sanctify and free them by his love touch. So when the babe's eye spied the trees, he uprooted them both to make good that prayer, and by his touch the souls of the youths into high heavens did rise, while he, the child, the great deliverer of all souls that are born, looked on and smiled, and the populace wondered at the fall of the trees, and marveled how the child had been saved from death as they crashed down beside him. Blinded ones who know not love in its mightiness and nearness. Again one day little Krishna, romping with the playfulness of his youth years, heard the weak voice of a woman begging to sell her wares of fruits. Lean were her hands and shrunken her features, and her clothes were poor and thin because of the length of time they had been worn. Faint and quivering, the voice reached the ear of Krishna. With a glance of love that warmed her heart, he bounded to her side, asking for fruits and giving her paddy instead, when lo, at the touch of his hand, the face of the woman beamed with the light of beauty. Her voice, as with joy, rang out, and her basket was heavy and filled with gems that blazed and glittered in the noonday sun. And laughing, the child ran to his playmates and pets and divided the fruits with them all. Chapter 11. Now came a time when the oldest and wisest of the populace of the kingdom where Krishna was reared bethought it best to take the wonderful child from the place where men marveled at the wonder of him and came from far to look on his face. And anxiety filled the hearts of the people who loved him best for his safety, as calamity upon calamity came nigh him, and though no harm as yet did betide him, yet was it only a miracle that saved him from the child-killer Putana. And again only the hand of Vishnu had rescued him from the fierce whirling dust storm and the turning of the cart at his side, and last the 2 trees that crashed at his feet yet touched not a hair of his beautiful head. Yes, best by far it was to take away the child. So reasoned the elders, and Nanda approved, and forth they went with attendants and friends and all who lived in Gokula. And a caravan they formed, the cowherds driving the cows and calves before them, and carts bearing the women and children, and the men beating the drums to the voices of the women that broke forth in glad hopefulness. And bright was the sky that spanned their heads, and rich the forest through which they passed, and life-giving the sun was, and refreshing the winds were that greeted them on the way to Vrindavan. And in the early days of their sojourn in these rich forest depths, tents they erected, which soon were overspread with creepers that abounded in that place, and birds came near and nested in the tendrils, and the wild hare and shy deer nearer and nearer their new friends came, till all tamed they would feed from the hands of the gopis, and played with the children, and thus in peace and serenity they lived in Vrindavan. Vrindavan, the land of love and holiness, the land where Krishna laughed and played, the land that the center became of all spirituality because of his sojourn there. An ordinary boy, he walked with the boys, as tender of cows and calves, and in a little while the city of Vrindavan thrived, and a city of plenty it was to all who therein lived. But as time went on, even here the dread calamities seemed to follow the boy Krishna, for an asura sent by Kamsa assumed the form of a calf, and strayed among the calves, hoping thus to elude the eye of the child and perhaps take him unawares. But hardly had he mixed with the herds when Krishna pointed him out, and strode to where the calf was grazing. With easy grace he lifted him by the hind legs and twirled him high in the air till lifeless the asura was. Then midst the shouts of the cowherd boys and companions he lifted his face to the skies, which opened wide to his smiling eye. Chapter 12. In the morn of summer, early, even before the sun yet bathed the world with its golden warmth, the companions of Krishna, aroused from their slumber by the lowing of the cows, would gather about the house of Nanda and wait for Krishna to come from his bed and go with them to the forest to tend the cows, and while away the sweet hours of long summer days with sporting and tales and long rambles together. And oft as they waited about the gates of the palace, Yasoda would speak to the waiting boys. Ye children, my Krishna has not yet opened his eyes to the light of the day. His sleep is sound, nor will I wake him till of his own will he comes from his bed. So go with the cows and leave him to me. But the boys would not stir, but would still wait his coming. But the joy left their eyes because of their longing to look at the boy who was love. And loud were the cries that came from the boys as they saw him approaching, and then come in their midst, and he with the boys as a boy would be. And oft Yasoda, the mother who reared him, would take him aside and remonstrate with him thus, O my Krishna, my son, why wilt thou thus spend thy time with the cows and the cowherds? A son of the king art thou, O my boy, and thy place is not there with the cows in the pastures. Many servants have we to see to the herds. Come, take thou thy flute, bedeck thyself with garments and ornaments, as it doth behoove my son and a prince. Then Krishna, twining his arms round the neck of his mother, with a world of glowing love in his visage, would gaze far away into the heart of his people and reply to her who knew him as son. O mother beloved, well it is for me, a son of a king, with the people to be. Though of the palace, yet is my place there where the people call unto me. Tender am I of the flock, O my mother, and to them I must go. With them must I be, to teach them myself and the power of love. Even now must I go to the calling hearts, who madly seek me, and will not be satisfied till again me they see. And Yasoda, the mother, in amazement gazed on the face of her son, and understood not his prattle that such wisdom held. But the tears of fond pride rose to her eyes, as she saw the love that came from the boy, and enveloped him as a soft cloud of light. And she kissed her son, seeing but in him a merry little child, bounding and throbbing with victorious health. Onward he ran to greet his companions, who were satisfied now as they beheld his coming, and laughing the group went to the forest. They played, burying their bare feet in the mosses, rolling in the sweet grass, clapping their hands in the fullness of joy, and shouting in very ecstasy of being. Never saw they in him the son of a king. They knew him but as a cowherd boy, who like them tended the cows in pastures and forests. End of chapter 12. Chapters 13, 14, and 15 of Sree Krishna, the Lord of Love, by Baba Premanand Bharati. Chapter 13. Again, the cowherds, including Krishna, went with their cows to give them drink, and also to quench their own great thirst. Sporting on the banks of the lake, they suddenly saw a monster crane coming towards them with great flapping wings. Affrighted, they turned, all but Krishna, to flee, but ere a moment had passed, the huge bird had devoured Krishna. But only an instant he was lost to sight, for before the boys knew what calamity had come upon them, the bird in great haste gave up the prey that brought to his throat the sensation of burning, for when Krishna entered his body, it was as if liquid fire poured all through him. Then seeing Krishna again in the midst of the boys, lo, with the beak and the talon, he again made for him, but Krishna seized the beak with his hands and ripped the great body in halves, even as women tear in half fine linen, which requires no effort, and the demon was again allayed. Again it happened that the boys with Krishna sought the forests in sport to engage. While bounding in frolicsome play, they beheld at a distance a huge serpent stretched forth in its length like a range of hills. Wide open its mouth was, and close to the path of the boys it lay. In an instant within it they walked, all but Krishna, who contemplated the monster with eyes full of power. Then straight into its jaws he too went. But now the hideous serpent writhed in pain, and like monstrous bellows its great sides heaved, for Krishna had expanded within its throat till it expired, shaking all the earth in its throes of death. And the boys laughed in glee as out of the great jaws of the serpent they walked. But Krishna lifted his eyes to the sky, and illumined all the heavens became, for the dispenser of all light destroyed the evil that sought to reign in that land where love dwelt, and with mighty strength he felled the feeble hands of evil to the ground. For where Krishna was, illumination was, and darkness could not draw life. The deadly shade of sin sought to blight and blast the garden, where truth bloomed fair and tall, but so ripe with love it was that it could not on that soil take root to create its evil, nor yet prevent the good. For the knower of all that is knowable saw with his all-seeing eye the spirit of every stress and storm, and laid it low ere its brewing began. And thus his blessing gave increase to plenty, and virtue it added unto good, and unto them that loved in that realm of love stones were as bread, and wormwood as sweetness was. Evil is sin, and hateful to love, and Krishna had the longing and the power he wielded to save his world from the pestilent blast of the sin that in boldness sought to destroy it. As love, he came, the maker of man and of the universe, to rescue man, his creation, from the rottenness of his own doings. Chapter 14. And Brahma, the Creator, witnessed the miracles that Krishna, the child and the youth, was performing hourly at his plays and gambols, and marveled if he, the child, might be that was come to succor Mother Earth in her trial. Surely sometime, somewhere, in some place, it was said that the all-wise being that was over all as a little child would be born among men to save them from their blinded selves and turn them Godward, looking towards home. This he knew had been said. Was this child the one that the eternity was, he the rememberer of all beings and things? He would know it in proving the power of his yoga, for if this were the absolute Lord, he alone would be the Lord of the lords of all yogis. Krishna, sitting with his boys in the forest, discovered that the herds had disappeared from their sight. On seeing the alarm on the face of his friends, Krishna exclaimed, I myself shall fetch back the cows, so be not anxious, eat to your fill of the fruit you are munching. He searched and called, but the cows were as vanished, and returning again to his playmates, he found they too were missing. Then a smile, as the sun doth break through the clouds, shone on his face, and with yoga maya he divided himself into cowboys and cows, and even into calves, and he himself leading them who were of him the all, he returned with the cows and the boys to the village. But mark, when the boys, that were parts of Krishna, love manifest, ran to the arms of their mothers, a thrill that was ecstasy played through their beings, and never did mothers love so their sons as the mothers who held to their hearts the boys whom by his power he had made from himself. And so it was with the cows and the calves. Those who milked the cows were wild with joy to stroke their hides and feed them, and milk of those cows as nectar was. And Krishna stood with the cowboys among the cows, and smiled in his wisdom at them all. Now Brahma knew that the boy was the Lord, who as child to man had come, for by his yoga power he had taken the cows and calves and boys to a cavern, and there put them to sleep. But Krishna, to prove himself the greatest in power, had divided himself into boys, cows, and calves, and for 1 year had been thus. When Brahma saw this, from trance sleep he awoke the sleepers, and bowing low to the feet of Krishna, salutation made, and thus did burst forth, O Lord of all love, O being supreme, O source of all life and maker of all, oft in the eyes of my yoga glimpses of thee have I caught, and thy loveliness and majesty transcend all beauty. What is the merit of the earth that thou shouldst bless it with thy beautiful feet? Have looked upon the earth and have seen thy love in all things, but I perceived not that thou in thy mercy wouldst live among men even as man. Through thy coming each heart that a hovel in poorness was into a palace of riches has grown. Through thy coming all flesh its grossness has lost, since to the eyes of man thou seemingly walkest in the flesh. Thou who the center of thy radiance art, yet walkest within that radiance, what is the mystery of thy great self? Thou who teachest the bird to cleave the sky, and hath made me the creator of earth, and continuest the motion thereof. Thou who the concrete art, and yet the abstraction thereof dost prove. Thou mystery of all mysteries, the secret, the indistinct, and yet the sublimely simple parent of the universe. Thou who art the whole, and yet the parts, the immensity, and yet the mote of things. A poor groveler am I, at thy feet in the dust. Why hast thou blessed me to know thee thus? Thou art the ocean of existence, and saints and gods and men and all thy creatures are but the uncounted waves that play and stretch and heave on thy breast. From thy abode hast thou come of thine own sweet will to give unto all the power of thy love. Dull were my eyes to behold not in thee the Lord, who stamped on all things the name of his love, and with the name its potency too. O thou, all beauty and power and sweetness and strength, refuse me not the bliss to dwell in homage at thy feet. Thou who art the cause of all things, who stirrest the root and stem of all life into love, who art the indestructible truth of things, thee I meditate and worship for ever. Chapter 15. In the glad land of Vrindavan, the land where love reigned supreme because of the presence of him who was love personified, who was love incarnate, and who as a boy did bless the world with his being. In that land, mid childish sport and gladsome frolic, Krishna grew into beauty of youth. Day by day the land became more beautiful in the joyous springtime, and one day his brother Rama, he whose growing was beautiful, and who like Krishna was marveled at for the wonder of his doings, said unto Krishna, Does not the smell of the forest invite thee, O brother? Even here the air is heavy with ripeness of the fruit that the sweet spring air hath brought us. Shall we not go and pluck from the trees and eat our fill of the fruits that are dropping on the ground in luxuriousness, but to become rotten? Gladly would we go, said the other boys, but we fear Dhanuka of the demon family, who dwelleth close thereby. It is said that he hath taken the form of an ass, and though he seemeth harmless, yet hath he much power for evil, which he wieldeth mightily when he hath a chance to do so. So though we would gladly partake of the fallen fruit, yet do we fear him. But what sayest thou, Krishna? Thou canst, if thou wilt, destroy all who are filled with hate and evil. Wilt thou and Rama use your strength to protect us? Let us away, quoth Krishna, and in a few moments, heated and full of laughter, the boys were shaking the trees for the golden-sided fruit, which seemed to smile upon them in its beauty of ripeness. But at the first sound of happiness that reached the ears of the ass, he rushed in the midst of the youngsters and sought to destroy them, making Rama and Krishna the special objects upon which to vent his hatred and strength. For a time both boys dodged hither and thither, trying to turn aside the anger of the ass, but seeing that it would not be appeased, Rama caught him by the hind legs, and after swinging him over the heads of the boys a few times, he dashed his head against the tree and proceeded to aid the boys in picking the fruit. The braying of the ass had brought forth the kith and kin of the asura who dwelt in the forest with him, but they too in a brief struggle were killed by Rama and Krishna. End of chapter 15. Chapters 16, 17, and 18 of Sree Krishna, the Lord of Love, by Baba Premanand Bharati. Chapter 16. In those days, when love was predominant and held no place for that which overcame and destroyed that which could not hold sway, there, because when love is strong and active, then doth evil become feeble and weak, and slinketh away into darkness and deep places, where the light of love cannot reach in to reveal its blackness unto the light of the sky. In the river on whose bank Krishna, Rama, and the cowherd boys often sat and sang the deeds of their hero, there dwelt a huge serpent monster with 1,000 hoods, who by the venom of his hideous body did permeate the water of the lake with deadly poison, and fill the air of the vicinity with a pestilent atmosphere that was deadly in its influence. Krishna one day led the boys and cows to this pool, and they, being athirst, drank of the deadly water that lay still and without a ripple. Ever is evil inviting in its outward calm. But lo, in an instant the 1,000-headed monster lifted its hoods, and the deadly poison having done its ghastly work, the boys and cows lay on the bank, lifeless and motionless. They fell at the feet of Krishna. With a glance of life-giving love cast upon the dead ones, Krishna walked to a tree that was close by, while the boys, alive again, in amazement and wonder, gazed at each other, forgetting in the joy of the love, in the look that Krishna had cast upon them the moment before. On reaching the top of the tree, Krishna stood for an instant and gazed at the boys, his world, and the serpent, and a light as of molten gold seemed to come from that body, more lovely than the sun to look upon. Thus it was for a moment. Then into the deadly pool he plunged, while the 1,000 heads of the serpent darted their venomous tongues and struck the body till the boys fell into unconsciousness, and the cows groaned in pain, and the men and women with eyes bulging with fear and tearing their hair almost swooned at the sight of the boy who was God, crushed in the poisonous embrace of the monster. Yet even as stricken with horror they gazed. Krishna, a glance like light on them cast, and breaking away from the grasp of the monster, he lightly sprang upon its hooded head, and danced like the stars upon its hoods, till one by one low they were laid, and vomiting blood that was thick and black, defeated and broken, the monster sank beneath the waves. And with a bound Krishna stood in the midst of his friends who knelt at his feet. Then they drew him within their arms in the madness of joy at his safety. Chapter 17. Oh, grand was the sight of love, crushing out hate from the land, and the gods sang and shouted and crowded together to see sin conquered and virtue grow strong. Yasoda and Nanda, with the gopas and gopis, maddened with delight, took Krishna home, while the heavens opened and scattered flowers to carpet his path. And forever the lake was free from the venom the serpents had cast, and the nearby atmosphere purified was from the pestilent influence that hovered about there. For the monster Krishna's command had departed, and sought no more to injure the land. But so great was the happiness that overflowed the heart of all, in leading the boy triumphant through the forest, that they tarried a while in the glow of the moon, in their joy to behold the beauty that filled the night. But far in the distance a light was seen, that spread wider and broader its glow, and higher its flame leaped, and every second nearer and nearer yet it came, like a living sheet of fire. And so it was. A castor plantation, a burning world had become, and quickly surrounded the merrymakers, who held in their midst the joy of their hour, and they cried in affright, O Krishna, thou child, or God, whatever thou art, protect us from this death in this roaring flame. We care not for our lives, O Krishna, for they are thine by our love for thee, but oh, the anguish the parting would mean, to die and not see thy face again. O thou who by thy strength dost slay the asuras, and drive from the land the serpent all-powerful, save us from this, the parting with thee and thy loved companion Rama, he that is most like thee. O most lovely one, deliver us, we pray. Light as a leaf in the wind, the boy bounded to meet the coming flames. For a moment he stood in the seething sea of fire, and lifted his hand on high, and lo, the fire was not, but the flames were seen to enter his mouth. And again with dancing and singing praise to the boy, they made for his home with joy and delight. Chapter 18. One summer day Krishna and Rama and their companions, in the shade of the trees, were sporting among themselves, when they saw coming toward them a stranger, a boy, clad as a tender of cows. He joined in the games, and soon all were merry, but Krishna, the knower of all, and the all-seeing one, in him beheld an asura named Pralamba, who had come in their midst to bring calamity, though friendship he feigned. Krishna proposed a game to be played by dividing the boys into equal numbers and fighting in sport one with the other. Krishna was chosen the leader on one side and Rama the leader on the other. The defeated side, it was proposed, must carry on their backs the winners of the victorious side, and so the play began. Krishna's side was defeated, and it was ordered that, among others, Pralamba the asura carry Rama on his back. Away went the boys, each defeated, one carrying on his back a winner. Suddenly the boys heard Rama's voice shouting to them, and behold, the asura, by black magic power, a giant had become and was flying through the forest with Rama on his back. Krishna looked at them, then shouted to Rama, "Brother, forget not that thou art Vishnu, and that I am here." In an instant all fear left the heart of Rama, and remembering who as what he was filled with almighty power, and felled the giant with a heavy blow, and the play went on as before. Another time the cows strayed into the forest and were overtaken by a great conflagration, and like wild beasts they leaped and bellowed through the forest. The boys followed and called, but onward the cows plunged, nor heeded their voices, till Krishna's voice they heard. Then turning they gathered about him, seeing naught but the love and power in his eyes. For the brood is ever still by the might of love. Unlike man, it knoweth its power, and yieldeth to its force. But the boys still turned towards Krishna, full of fear of the conflagration that threatened to envelop them. He looked at them all, and their fear was allayed. Then he gazed at the fire and asked the boys their eyes to close. This they did, and when they looked again, the flames were no more to be seen. Such was the yoga power of Sree Krishna, and the boys, seeing his wonderful acts, knew that Krishna was more than boy. And joyous were they, and gathered flowers and leaves that grew in great abundance at the foot of the trees, and they all wove them into garlands of white, purple, and red, and wound them about Krishna's neck, and also bedecked each other with flowers, and threw wreaths about the cows' necks and the calves, and homeward they wended their way in the twilight, just as the sun was sinking to rest. The birds ceased their sleepy chirp, and opened their eyes wide, and sleep left the flowers that nodded near the roadside, and the sun stood in space a moment to watch the procession that galloped down the road. Krishna the beautiful came in the lead, bedecked and beflowered. The spirit of life he was, with a transfiguring glory in his face, and his eyes full of softness and love light, his body all graceful in curves to behold, yet strong in the vigor of youth that shone through its grace. With his hands on the necks of his two favorite cows, those who ever followed him about as a child, the white on his right side, the black on his left, homeward they ran, while the white dust arose and covered and caressed them, one after the other, each bedecked with garlands, and each boy between two cows who like them were wreathed with wild flowers. And the elder gopis and gopas held their breath at the sight so entrancing, that reached their eyes at the homecoming of the boys and their cows, bedecked and beflowered with the sweet wild flowers, and headed by him whom they loved. End of chapter 18. Chapters 19, 20, and 21 of Sree Krishna, the Lord of Love, by Baba Premanand Bharati. Chapter 19. Thus spring ripened into summer and autumn, and again the rolling seasons touched upon the heels of one another, and Krishna grew into greater beauty with each season of his earthly career. More and more the people of Vrindavan became absorbed in him. The young and old, those near and far, looked upon him as one without whom they could not exist. And so it was, the complete whole was he, of whom they were but parts, and ever were they reaching to again find the heart out of which they had sprung. His smile was to them the sun that warmed, his words the flowers which filled them with joy, his deeds the fruits which satisfied the hunger of their hearts. The very quick of their lives he was, and nothing lived, breathed, bloomed or grew in Vrindavan, from the people to the cattle, creeping things and all that grew, that did not draw life from the Lord that dwelt as youth among them. And the milkmaids, who in loving companionship oft with him roamed to the hillside, where with the other boys he tended the cattle, would in fond love contemplate the youth, knowing not what the potency was that drew them, forgetful of all duties, to his side. And among themselves they would speak thus, "Oh, how sweet is the hillside when Krishna is near! How sublime is his countenance, and his eyes how beautiful with piercing love light filled! Serene doth he stand, yet bewilderingly entrancing is the joy that comes to our souls by his glances that seek us in softness and kindness." Was aught as beautiful, they were wont to say, as our Krishna, clothed in blue and gold, with the crown of peacock feathers on his brow, and a garland of fresh flowers festooned from his shoulders? Why is it that flowers that girdle him thus never fade or wither or die, but deeper their colors and stronger their petals and sweeter their fragrance are, when in contact with him they have come? And the fields where he walketh, see how they smile, and give their treasures in greater abundance. And the rivers close by, they rise high on our land, as if to dwell longer on our banks, because our Krishna is here. At the notes of his flute, all exquisite, whose potent spell must charm all the living, see how his cattle do greet him, and tremble and thrill at the sound of the music. And even the untamed things of the forest, with wistful look and nostrils spread, unbidden and unafraid, do stand on the crest of the hill, as if drawn and subdued by the influence of his love sound. Oh, the sound of his flute is proof against the iron-moulded mind, and can soothe a very giant of fierceness into gentleness by its sweetness. Checked is every fear, and rebellion is laid low in every heart, and a kingdom of love every home becomes, wherein that sound hath pierced. Ofttimes it seemeth that time itself doth suit its step to keep pace with its rhythm, for note ye not how the sun doth stand loath to move, lest the sight and sound it loseth? Oh, why are we not the flute he holds to his lips? Blessed beyond all things it is, for his kisses it receives, and drinks the nectar of his love to its fill. What wonder that it joys to give the sound forth that his breath doth make? Or why are we not the trees under which he sitteth, and whose branches he counteth with happy gaze, or even the grass where he reclineth, that hath the dear privilege to caress his sweet body in lowly love? But we can only look on his face and die with longing when from him we go. Thus spake the maids, but their tongues could not tell what bliss overflowed the heart, welling up with love for him who wakened in every heart the love that was all divine, from the babe's first smile to the man who looked first on the glorious earth, and then to the arched sky, and then in his heart, and found there a sum of love that was all bliss. In Krishna, the youth who played the flute in the forest by night, on the hillside by day, in him who charmed all that was, they beheld the fullness of love. He gave them and received all bliss. He was the spring of love that had the more for the giving. He satisfied the most when many did draw from his wellspring. To the heart of all mothers he came as a child, and in tenderness and joy they caressed him as such. Like a flower dropped untouched from heaven, they held him. The men he approached as a friend and a son, and gave and received the love that they craved and felt. The servant too he met in the way he sought to be known, and by him he was served and did serve. Thus to all he gave what they craved to have, unstinted, unfettered he was in the giving, and none was there in all that land that sought and could not find what their hearts did seek. And to the maids who opened their pure young hearts for the all-enduring, mysterious love, he gave of his inexhaustible source the sweet touch that harmonized all things and made the heaven and earth to meet. All kindred were they, for he was their parent, and their love was but part of his holy flame. And with the light from that flame there awakened within them that which knew but love, which was but love. And Krishna it was who filled all their being, and outward consciousness to them was lost. Hail to thy maiden love, O Gopi! Thy love, the triumph of man and God, the crown of time's blessedness it was, O climax of happiness complete. Chapter 20. When the days of fasting came, the Gopis, as the scriptures commanded, began their worship by taking their baths in the sacred river Jamna. O happy waves, more holy made by the maids who stood in prayers in thy beds and threw on thy bosom the sweetest flowers that grew where Krishna's feet had fallen. Thus they worshipped each day for a month in the early morn, ere the sun was seen, singing on their way the songs of love and praise for Krishna, who was the first and the last and middle of all their day. One morning, while sporting and singing in the clear cooling waters, they beheld on the limbs of a tree close by the youth Krishna, enthroned in its branches and holding their wearing apparel in his hands. Crowned as usual with flowers was he, but a look all majestic was in his eye. Affrighted with shame, they begged for their garments, but Krishna replied, "Come and get your garments, either in a body or singly, O damsels, and salute to the sun shining over my head as near you approach." For a moment they hesitated, then that which as a shadow had crossed their heart, and is known as shame, departed from them, and saluting forward they came in a body, led by Radha, the loveliest and chiefest of the milkmaids, and dripping and lovely before him they stood. Completely they had surrendered their human will to the will of him who was divinity. Selfless, unyoked from all that was worldly, before him they stood, uncovered and free as they came from his heart. Again on that heart they gazed unashamed, for their souls were not covered with vice, or with piety, or even with virtue, but were bare as the love upon which they looked. They received the garments that he for them had. He, Krishna, the source of pure love was, and his garments to them were spiritual purity, and clothing themselves with the clothes of his giving, they joyfully went to the homes of their fathers. While Krishna, surveying his world, was enthroned in his kingdom of love, and as the Gopis came to the feet of him who was the author of all love, so all must come empty and free from all earthly desires, to accept that love for love's sake. For naught cared the Gopis but Krishna, desiring naught else beside. So only can love absolute be gained in absolute self-surrender. He who would have that love that is its own enjoyment, that love that a universe unto itself is, doth not find it easy to obtain it by merit, or piety, or even the fruition of highest spirituality, the bounds of all spirituality. It must pass to become the absolute and causeless love. Where spirituality ends, there causeless love doth begin. All love that hath the cause is of earth. Love that hath even a high spiritual cause is limited in scope, and such love may vanish when its cause is removed. But the love that is causeless, all enduring is. It fadeth not, neither doth it pass away, but by day and by night and throughout all time it waketh and accumulateth ever, for it is the love absolute. From the souls of the Gopis the last trace of heaven and earth had vanished, and being resplendent with the glory of this love absolute, of the love that was unto itself substance and satisfaction, was the causeless cause, for this gift of all gifts from the hand of him who alone could bestow it, and alone was that love itself. Chapter 21. The summer sun beat down fiercely upon the Gopas. and the cattle, when Krishna turned to them, saying, "See the wonder of these trees. Kind beyond expression are they. They ask for naught but what the earth, sky, and sun, the night and day, give unto them. Yet in all loyalty they grow, and give shade unto us, and unto all that wish to partake of their shade. Their fruits also do they give, and their bark and leaves and juices to all who desire it. So should man also be, but few are there among men that live, but to bestow blessings upon others. Yet unto you I say, O my loved companions, only unto them that give of their abundance to all that come within their radius, unto them alone is life a blessing and not a curse. All men are placed here, not of their own free will, not yet unto themselves, but by the will of love and for others. And only as the law of give and take is set in operation among men, is man living a natural life. Ofttimes doth the man wonder why he is unto himself a huge perplexity. It is only when he forgets his relationship to all mankind that his life a riddle is, and this being so, he comprehendeth not the Maker of himself, nor the universe, and failing to do so, how can he know life aright? After sporting among themselves, the boys spoke to Krishna, saying, O Krishna, a-hungered are we. Where, O where shall we find food? Canst thou not assist us? And Krishna answered them, saying, Go there yonder, where many Brahmins are performing religious ceremonies. Go to them, and in my name say unto them, to supply us with food. Say unto them that Krishna is wanting, and ask them therefore. The boys went, but when they delivered unto them the message of Krishna, the Brahmins answered not, neither gave them the food they wished, but proceeded with the ceremonies that were to give them the taste of heaven, after the breath had left their bodies. Tired and half famished, the boys returned unto Krishna, and told him of their failure to obtain food, and also of the indifference with which the Brahmins had received his message. Then Krishna smiled wisely, and told them to hurry to the wives of the Brahmins, he knowing that women are ever devotional and have illumination, while ofttimes men in darkness are. And so it was. On hearing Krishna's request, they themselves hastened to him, in spite of the protestations and threats of the men of the families, and brought food of the finest sorts unto him, and prostrating themselves before him spake, O Krishna, thou maker of all there is, blessed are we and ours, that thou hast called upon us to serve thee. We know thee, O Krishna, as one greater and nearer to us than our husbands, brothers, and fathers, and even at the risk of their displeasure to us, we come to thee to lay at thy feet our poor offerings and our hearts. Krishna answered, O women, noble and true are ye to me. Ye in your devotions have learned to know me as your soul. Dearer to ye am I, even than father, husband, and friends. Hence, at the risk of even their displeasure, do yet seek to serve me. I draw unto me all that reach towards me. Blessed are ye among men. Go back to those who are performing the ceremonies, and aid them in their rituals. Kindly shall they receive ye, and unto them will ye take my love, even as unto ye all I bestow it. When he saw the reluctance with which they departed from him, he said, Know that in the kingdom of love separation cannot be, and whatever heart doth meditate on me, in that heart I dwell in all my glory. Again, O know that by deeds I reckon ever, and not by words. Ye have served me by deeds, your husbands in their ignorance by words alone. But do ye go unto them, and they too shall know and love the name of Krishna. And the women returned unto their husbands, who received them with demonstrations of pleasure, and they too worship Krishna in their homes and hearts. End of chapter 21. Chapters 22, 23, and 24 of Sree Krishna, the Lord of Love, by Baba Premanand Bharati. Chapter 22. When the summer was over, one day Krishna saw that great preparations were being made for the celebration of ceremonies in honor of one of the gods. Clothed in seeming ignorance, Krishna said to Nanda, "Why these preparations, O Father, and for whom are they made, and what is the potency thereof? Is it a custom that through all time hath been observed? Or tell me, do the scriptures demand that these ceremonies be held?" Then Nanda answering said, "We offer today sacrifices to him, the god of the clouds, to him who watereth our hillsides and giveth drink to our crops and our cattle, to him Indra, the god who promoteth all growth by the blessing of rain, which he doth supply. A jealous god is he, O my Krishna, and desires that ceremonials and sacrifices often are made, and we in all humbleness strive to appease him, that in his wrath he may not withhold the moisture from our land, nor yet flood us with overmuch rain." Then Krishna replied, "My father, he who is the author of all, doth give unto all what is needed. He that in wrath withholdeth a blessing, he never the love of creation hath known, nor doth he destroy what he hath created. For the Creator doth ever love his creation, for that which from him hath come must for ever belong to him, and the part is of his great whole. So Indra cannot curse this land by overmuch rain, or dearth of it. But, O my father, tell the Gopas and Gopis to cease the preparations and worship not one who would destroy that which he should for ever bless. But come to the hillside that entwines our land, the hills and plains that furnish us with sustenance for our cattle, and to the forest too, where fruits grow in plenty, and give of their abundance to all who but take it. Come there, and give to the hill and the trees our sacrifices of joy and love, and feed the cows with offerings of fresh grasses, and walk with me around the hill in ceremonial procession, and we shall see their worth and their kindness." They did so, and Krishna said unto them, "I am the hill, and the good that therefrom doth come." And his body became of a height and length that the eye of man scarce could measure, and said, "Do ye salute it, and partake of its good." At that the rain poured down from the skies in fearful abundance, and the people in fear fled to their houses, afraid of the wrath of Indra. 7 days it poured and threatened to flood all the land, but Krishna smiled at the wrath of Indra as he poured down his mighty rains and rolled his thunder in threatening claps above the heads of the affrighted people who had dared to neglect the sacrifices to him who through all ages had been honored by them. In their calamity the people sought out Krishna, whom they found at the foot of the hill Govardhana. The light of his body lit the darkness of night, far more than the flashes of Indra's wrath that in lightning burst forth. "O Krishna," they cried, "thou who by thy yoga power can assume the form of a mountain at will, thou who dost drive from the path of thy feet all that unlike thy sweet will is, save us from the wrath of him who even now does seek to drive us from out of life." And Krishna lifted his hand and eye, and lo, all their fear was allayed. Then all the world grew light as day from the glory that radiated from his body, and by his yoga power he lifted the hill itself from off its base and held it on high on the tip of his 5th finger, even as the beetle doth hold on his horns the leaf that covereth him completely. The people gathered beneath the hill with their children and cattle. 7 days they were there, and 7 days Krishna held the hill above their heads, while the light that came from his smile illuminated all the space between the hill and its foundation. Then Indra, amazed, looked down from his clouds and knew that the Lord of all was there, and had baffled his attempt to destroy what he, the Lord of all love, had created. And the rain ceased its downpouring, and the rivers became calm, and the sun in its glory burst forth again, and flowers uplifted their water-drenched heads, and the trees sprang back, storm-tossed no more. And Krishna said to those whom he had sheltered, "Depart in peace, and fear no more the wrath of him who thought to destroy where he could not give life. And Indra, the god of the clouds, descended to earth, and falling at the feet of him in abject humility, said, O Lord, thou art the Holy One. Puffed up and proud was I in my power, and saw myself greater even than thou. Well know I now that love is the greatest power, and I, in my smallness of godship, insolent and destructive became. I sought the praise that is ever due to thee, O Lord of love, for unto resistless love alone praise should be given. But my vanity and pride I tried to shield by the power which thou didst endow me with. I thought that it was I who brought the life to all trees, and by my power kept the hills in green, and the forests in wondrous foliage, and gave drinks to the cows, and plenty to the rivers, and for it I longed to see men perform the ceremonies and pray to me. But to thee, O Lord of love, is due all the glory. By thee alone am I invested with power. Do thou in thy greatness forgive me, while I in humbleness do bow to thy lotus feet. And Krishna threw a glance at Indra that filled him with a great wild joy, and said, O Indra, though I invested thee with sovereignty by my will, be not over full of pride. For this I have stopped the ceremony, so that thou mayest learn to know me, whom thou in thy prosperity hadst quite forgotten. Go to thy abode, Indra, rule thy dominion, but know ever that pride and vanity are without power, and that love alone is mighty. To lighten the burdens of all my world, I have come to earth. I now lift from thee the load which hath caused thee to forget me, and in forgetting me to have lost the beauty which was born of me. And with the halo of joy about him, Indra returned to his abode, endowed with greater power. Chapter 23. And now autumn, sweetest and richest season of all the glad year, had come, and the brow of Vrindavan was fair to look upon. The first part of the Indian autumn, which comes after the rainy season, peace and love stood on every threshold and walked on every roadway, and all lifted up their voices, and the words of their gladness was, Love, love. In the hearts of all the song rose, and showed them pleasant ways and haunts that ended in bliss. Men knew gratitude and justice, which are the attributes of love. Love walked on earth and left its blessing in its trail. The flowers whispered their love to one another, and the dew clung closer to their petals because of the warmth of their love. All the land seemed to have ripened into the deepest beauty, for the beauty of love here was king. And Krishna was king, and reigned in every heart, and all bowed before the majesty of the beauty of his love. A substitute it was for all things, and satisfied the want of each heart, entrancing every object and person by its beauty. O wonder of love that expanded each soul and made it a world of joy and bliss. In this happy time, when the moon was full, Krishna recalled a promise he had made to the gopis to reward them richly for their love for him. So taking his flute he went to the forest and stood on the brow of the hill. All about the white moonlight lay, bathing in silver the fruit trees in blossom. Soft the winds were, and rich the fragrance that they brought on their breezes. The noises of night alone could be heard. And surveying his world with love-filled eyes, Krishna took up his flute and poured forth the strains that never were heard by man or god until that night on the moon-kissed hill, when all Vrindavan in peace did smile. At the sound of those strains all earth was thrilled in ecstasy. The rocks melted in love, the trees trembled, and the flowers fell on the earth, and men and beasts all pain forgot. And the gopis knew that call of love, nor heeded they duties or father or husband or children, but turning their heart to the sound of the flute, they followed their heart to Krishna's feet. At the first note, she who was feeding her household dropped her food and followed the sound, and she who was nursing her babe put her babe from her breast and answered the call. Another came with toilet incomplete. All forsook duties, husband and children, to find him who drew them by the sound that was made by his love. Separately they came, none observing the other. Over thorns and briars and stones they walked, Sharp twigs caught their hair, branches detained them, yet heeded they not these obstacles, but onward they went with hands torn and feet bleeding and garments rent and missing, till they stood at the hill where Sree Krishna played and drew from the flute the music entrancing, at which all the rocks and earth did thrill. With eyes maddened with love they gazed on him there. A wondrous vision was he. The light of the noonday radiated from him, and his beautiful eyes with mysterious glances fell on their souls like holy balm. And at that glance their souls were entranced and deepened and became as if one with him, and drank of the love that from him poured, and all that in them unlike him was became as pure as he. And that which in them unlike that love was, from out of their hearts had flown, and made pure and transparent in that glad place, they drank of that love which doth chain all creation to its Creator, love. Entirely blessed, they sought no more, nor hoped they more, for each held perfection in her eyes, and each knew perfect love in her heart. Chapter 24. Silent they stood and gazed on the beauty, concentrated love of a world in each eye. A spiritual force that swept from its path all matter was theirs, as they beheld that center to which their hearts did gravitate. The strains of the flute that made the heaven to bend to the earth, that brought the stars closer to the hillsides, and drew the gods from their abodes of light, had ceased, and the voice of him that was all love fell on the ears of the gopis in sound as sweet as the flute's dear strains. O gopis mine, maids of Braya, my peace and greeting be with you all. But why are ye here, one and all? Tell me this. The hour is late, and your homes at a distance are, and the forests are dark, and wild beasts are in plenty, and alone ye have come, without husband or father. What is it, pray tell me, that brings you here? Is it love for me that brings you here? I draw all to myself, and all love me. But, O gopis dear, the scriptures ever have said that the chaste woman leaveth not her husband, father, and babe, to look on the face of a youth. Pure are your hearts, I know, but it is not good that ye come to me, and it looseneth your chances to reach that place where all of your hearts do long to dwell, when to your bodies ye have said farewell. Perhaps ye have come to see the forest, silvered by the autumn full moon, or mayhap to greet the breezes that come from the hillsides, or the blossoms of the trees that grace its sides to behold. If this be so, now ye have seen them, depart to your homes, lest the hearts of your friends be alarmed at your absence. The bevy of women that crowded about him grew pale with pain and ashen with fear. Tears came to their eyes and anxiety to their souls as they heard the words of him who was all in all to them, till one more brave than the rest broke forth. O Lord, for the master of love art thou, send us not away from thy side. All have we left to serve thee, our master. Husbands have we, and fathers and brothers, but to thee alone we belong. They are but the keepers of our earthly bodies. Thou art the custodian of our souls. Our souls are thine, for thou art the soul from which we came, and panting we come to find again the home wherein to rest. Difficult art thou to find, O Lord, and now we have found thee. O thrust us not from thy lotus feet, we who find our joy and happiness in thee. Thy flute hath drawn us from our homes. O suffer us to remain with thee and know thee as thou art. Unable are we to live without thy love, O Lord, and our duties of home cannot engage us, since our minds are ever contemplating thee. If thou sendest us away, we shall die. Be thou kind to us, thy servants, and grant us to serve thee with our love. Then singing into their midst he came, he the Lord of the highest, the Lord of love, and Lord of the lowest, and Lord of mercy, and with mighty love swayed he all alike, and each self was forgotten, and love alone was. Now singing in chorus, now dancing, now skipping, the Lord and his maidens in those forest groves roamed till the river was reached. Then from over much pleasure proud each maid became, and her simple joy to vanity was turned, because thus she was favored by Krishna, the youth Krishna, the heavenly one Krishna, the glorious of all glorious ones. He, noting this, to punish the sin of vanity, in swiftness from them vanished, and with his going the sin was gone. Maddened by love, the maids pleaded to the skies and the trees and the flowers for him, who was their life, but still he came not. So absorbed in him they became, themselves they forgot, and even as Krishna they thought they were, and imitating his acts they cried to one another, Lo, I am Krishna, see, I hold the mountains on high. Lo, Putana, I slay and baffle the rage of Indra with my power, and still came he not. Then they sang his praises, then with breaking hearts they wailed and prayed for him to return to their midst. At this he came, for ever is the Lord most kind to the lowly and sorrowing. And he soothed their grief and brought light to their hearts, and forming a circle about him in ecstasy they danced. And now he, that was the king of the upper world, and of all the earth, of the plants and oceans and clustering stars, he, the Lord of all might and yoga power, himself divided into many Krishnas, and each gopi thought she herself danced alone with the glorious one, that as Krishna was known. And the dance began lightly, then matter became, and he who had come on earth to teach man love manifested himself in every maid that lightly and rarely stepped at his side as they danced in that grove on that wondrous night. And the lotus blossoms wept tears of nectar on seeing the dance, and birds and bees from unknown trees and flowers came forth and whirled round and round the heads of the dancing ones, and the heavens showered blossoms rare, and the gods who had stolen from their abode to watch the feast of love that Krishna gave to the lovely milkmaids, lo, senseless became at the first sight of that revel of bliss. And night throbbed and panted and forgot to draw its curtain to let day in, but lengthened into eons. The veil from every gopi's eye was drawn, and they gazed into the ocean of active spirituality, and spiritual became, and all sin that were theirs no more was there. And in that mighty dance a flood of spirituality went forth that took from the heart of men and the bosom of earth the sins with which they were burdened withal, and men's hearts were won by the force of that love, and were led to the door of that sacred abode, where only the loving may go. And the gopis, who by force were detained and could not come to the dance with Krishna, lo, in meditation sat, and in deep pain concentrated on him, and in that dance they were at his side, and felt his love embrace, and all their sins were as naught. For to touch Krishna with the mind alone was to gain spirituality and stand pure in his eyes. So in those hours of intensest happiness the world gained what for births it had striven to gain, and active love was ripe among mortals, and that love had wiped all sin away. And when the last ray of the moon was seen, into the waters of the laughing river they plunged, and ere the sun with ardent eye did awaken the sleeping Vrindavan, each maiden singing homeward went, transformed into a being of unalloyed love. End of chapter 24. Chapters 25, 26, and 27 of Sree Krishna, the Lord of Love, by Baba Premanand Bharati. Chapter 25. In the forest grove of moonlight, where the river sweetly hummed, where the night bird's plaintive chant broke in ecstasy the silence, where the drooping flowers opened wide their sleep-kissed eyelids to the night, and beheld the wondrous vision of the dancing maids and Krishna. In that hour, when every maiden felt her heart grow big to bursting for the love that in her swelled up in that hour, when every maiden saw beside her glorious Krishna, with his brow made fair with flowers, and his loins wreathed with lotus, when the heart of each sweet maiden foolish, because of pride, as she saw the one all beauteous, lightly treading at her side to the music of the dance. One there was of all those gopis, she the chiefest of them all, one who knew naught else but him, Every thought of self had vanished, every thought of aught but him. At his side she lightly stepped, nor felt the grass 'neath her feet, nor knew the strains of rapturous music that fell like wine upon each heart. All she knew was love was there, naught but this remembered she. To the winds that came from hillsides, to the shadows that the trees did cast, did she whisper over and over that confession of her love, till overweighed by the sweet burden did the winds in languorous love chant and sigh, then die in silence. And the shadows of the trees trembled at the depth of love that the maid did whisper to them as he passed them in the dance. Radha was she, youthful, lovely, she, his playmate of the forest, she, with love look in her face, she, the queen of love among them, giving all and asking naught. By the mighty will of him she had come on earth to dwell, she who ever reigned with him in glory, she now walked with him on earth. She the fairest of these maidens, she the rarest of them all, knowing love in its intensity, living all its bliss. And when he, the Lord of love, vanished from the dancing gopis, she, sweet Radha, with him vanished. And they wandered in the deep groves, these the twain, who in glory dwelt, she the loving, he the lover, both the blissful, both the purest. He the dew-kissed flowers gathered, twining them about the maiden, but the flowers in their beauty were not half as fair as she, and sweet Radha, pearl of maidens, gazed with love-light in her eyes, knowing naught was half so lovely as the hands that placed them there. Thus they roamed in shadowy moonlight, rested here in softened shadows, chanting love songs to each other, knowing naught but pure delight, till awearied with her roaming, Radha begged to cool her feet in the smiling waves of Jamna that she spied there in the moonlight. Krishna, greatest of all lovers, lightly stooped to lift the maiden, and in loving arms to bear her where the smiling waters rippled. But within the breast of Radha at that act pride sprang to being, and within that home of love vanity crept and nestled there. For a moment Krishna held her, then with lightning swiftness from her side he vanished. But in that twinkle of a moment Radha knew what her sin was, and aware of her enemy, the selfless love which was herself, her deity supreme, arose and quenched all thirst of vanity. Quickly gliding through the forest, she again did join the gopis, spying in the further distance Krishna, soothing one and all. To his side she lightly stepped, she the radiant, she, his heaven-mate, purged from sin and lightly clothed with the love that knew but him. Chapter 26. While the land of Vrindavan was rich in the love which Krishna flooded it withal, the heart of Kamsa, the brother of Devaki, was filled with fear for his life, for it was known to his quaking heart that the 8th child of Devaki still walked the earth, and also he knew that writ it was that the hand of that child would lay him low. Far and wide he sought the child, the boy, whom he felt was the God who had come to bring to the virtuous and lowly man peace, and sweep from the land the oppressor and tyrant. The marvelous deeds of Sree Krishna, his beauty and strength, the might of his love had been heralded far and wide, and all the then known world was turned towards the forest land of Vrindavan with expectant eye and thirsting heart. Forever the heart of man doth pant for and turn to the place where love doth dwell. When tales of Krishna's wonderful life and glorious deeds came to the ears of Kamsa, he felt that the boy whom Yasoda and Nanda reared as their own in sweet Vrindavan was the child that he sought to kill when he came from the womb of Devaki, and when by the hand of fate itself he had been baffled. And the dull, hungry flame of hatred and anger rose like fire in this bad man's heart, and an atmosphere as of hell about him rose, and all his peace slipped to the dust, and his secret fear that like a coiled serpent had lain in silence now uncurled its length and lifted his head and darted here and there to strike the prey that aroused it from its slumber. And long he sat and meditated evil against the youth that he could not slay in spite of his kingship, for the name of Krishna was a balm to the hearts of all men who had ever heard it spoken, and though king he was and ruler over many, he knew that the strength of the fame of Krishna, the boy bred in Vrindavan, more potency possessed than the name of Kamsa the king, for he was ruler over the bodies of men only. His name dwelt on the tongues of men who prattle with words alone, and those words embodied not the thought from which they sprang, words that praised where praises were not due, and applauded where it was not deserved. Men who dared not note the indignity of his motives and their results, nor discriminate between the righteousness of his action and his blood-dyed deeds, vexed his ears with fawning acclamations today because of his power, yet tomorrow blamed and hissed him out of sight. But Krishna was ruler over all hearts by the might of his wondrous love. He was the divine incarnation, the inner call, the satisfied softness that all felt, compelling all, yet demanding naught. Uncovered, frank, he stood forth, inviting all to look on him, to know and to love and be saved, too deep for the human understanding to measure, too large for human heart to embrace, yet acquainting each man with himself. This love, still untaught, still gazing on him who was all encased in love, all made of love, all teeming with love, they knew themselves of his creation and him, their sovereign Lord. And Kangsa knew that by knowing him the world would boldly recoil from the sickening deeds of his cruelty, the foul plots of his life would be laid bare to all, and the world in rebellion would rise. And he knew too that he and his worldly powers as a weakling would be by the side of the cowherd Krishna. So among his counselors an edict went forth that festivities be held in honor of the bow on the 14th day of the lunar month, and that sacrifices in great abundance be made. He also said unto them that preparations be made, and pavilions be raised, and the arena cleared, and the amphitheatre festooned with flowers and banners, and proclamations were issued that all the inhabitants of his whole kingdom be invited to his capital, and that the people of Braya be included therein. At last he sent his ambassador in great pomp and glory to call to his palace the 7th son of Devaki, Balaram, and the 8th son, Krishna, to witness the sports and partake in the wrestling contests, and show to the kingdom their dexterity and strength. Thus spoke Kangsa, and called to Akrura, and made him the ambassador that was to bring Krishna and Rama to Mathura. But this also he ordered: when here they are brought, see that the strongest and mightiest wrestlers of my kingdom be brought to match them, and fairly or foully to lay them low. And he added, if your death fails to meet them withal, keep the infuriated elephant close to the gate, so that he in his madness may tread out the life of Krishna at my command. These were his orders, and Akrura, his ambassador, bowing to him, departed to Braha. Chapter 27. The sun was setting in Braha, and Krishna with companions was homeward leading the cows to be milked. The hills were gold-tipped, the chirp of the birds and sleeping echoes fell on the ear, when far in the distance the hoofs of stamping steeds pounding the earth caused the boys to turn. Coming in royal splendor towards them, they beheld a chariot with blazing banners of the colors of the royal house of Mathura. The boys stood in amazement at its nearer the chariot came, but Krishna smiled with his eye full of wisdom, and aslant he looked toward the boys and the cows, and then at Akrura, the ambassador who came in the chariot. At that glance Akrura quickly descended and fell at the feet of Krishna, and saluted him in reverence and worship, for the dart of love that came from Krishna revealed to the heart of Akrura that Krishna was more than human and not less than divine. With that glance his soul was drawn to the soul of him who stood there to receive him and his message, and he knew that the author of life he beheld, and that blessed he was beyond all measure to be chosen to look on that wonderful face. A moment he lay in the dust at the feet of the youth, Akrura the proud, the inmate of palaces, the counselor and companion of the king and emperor. Then with kindly grace Krishna raised him and embraced him, and led him forth to the house of Nanda, and with his own hands brought rich drinks and choice viands, with the countenance that had on it the glow of the sun, and the beauty that surpassed all the beauty ever seen. And having partaken of the meal with his father and brother and guest, Krishna addressed him thus: O friend, long I knew of this coming of thine, and marveled at its delay. Yet tell them, my kinsmen, the errand of thee on which thou wert sent. Then Akrura related to Nanda and the fear-stricken Yasoda the king's message, his plans, and his evil design. A smile of wisdom flitted over the face of Krishna as he nestled close to the side of his mother, and bade her forget her anxiety for him, as none there was in all the world that could harm him. He vowed that even the most dreaded Kangsa was powerless to bring about the evil he planned. But the mother Yasoda, she who had reared and nourished the child at her heart, she who had caressed his lovely baby softness, and with fondness saw his first toddling steps, she could not be comforted, nor would her heart cease its beating of pain and terror. And Akrura related how Kamsa in wrath had thrown Devaki and Vasudeva into prison on hearing that Krishna was the 8th son of their union, and Yasoda wept as the thought of the mother who had lost all her sons at the cost of Krishna, and yet had not the blessing of suckling him. Yasoda, most blessed of all women art thou, who nursed the Lord of love as thy son, and fitted wert thou by him to bestow on his baby life thy caresses, and receive the love that flowed from him. Worthy wert thou to croon him to sleep, to bathe the sweet beauty of him who, though he had all there was, yet chose to be soothed and guided and directed by thee in his babyhood. And when to boyhood's estate he grew, and startled all the world by the wonder of his doing, to thee he came as a little child to be loved and petted and soothed of his weeping and fretting. And now when called king of the land, and called king by the hearts of the whole known world, that panted to look upon his wonderful beauty and see the might of his strength, even now close to thy heart he nestles and twines his arms about thy neck, and gazes with love light into thine eyes to comfort thee, and feels a shadow mantle his heart as he banishes the pain from thy brow. For well he knows that no more to thee the forest child he will be, for the world now claims him as its own, and his bigger world an actor he must be. Thus heart to heart they sit, the mother and the foster son, he who was Lord of all the world, and she who reared him as a child. End of chapter 27. Chapters 28, 29, and 30 of Sree Krishna, the Lord of Love, by Baba Premanand Bharati. Chapter 28. So night wore away, and in the early morning hours Akrura was ready to start on the journey with Rama and Krishna. But great was the wail and heart-rending the lamentations that came from the hearts of the gopis. With tear-filled eyes they rushed to his home and pleaded and prayed that he stay in their midst, for to them life seemed impossible without him, and Vrindavan could not be blessed when he ceased to walk thereon. And what would the cattle and flowers and trees do without the sound of his love-touched flute? O remain with us, Krishna, O Lord of our hearts, O keep close to our land, most beautiful one. Broken are our hearts, bowed low our spirit at the thought of our lives without thy presence to cheer us. Dull are our minds and leaden our hearts by the pain of thy going. O leave us not in this ocean of sorrow, but stay where we ever may look on thy face. O thou who shapest all that is, who hast knitted our hearts to thyself, how canst thou tear it away from us who know the sweetness of its love and the fruits that spring therefrom? Once having known thy smile, O Krishna, how can we bear the dawning of day without the light of thy smile, in which the concentrated beauty of thy whole creation lies, to fill it and make each day whole? And how can we see the shadows of night thicken and darken, and know that no more we will roam in forest and dance in the moonlight with thee, our beloved? O depart not from us, thou in whom we are buried, thou whose love doth envelop us all, thou whose universe embrace around us is entwined. O go not from out our midst, we implore thee. Thus tearing their tresses and weeping, the gopis clung to the wheels of the chariot in which Krishna and Rama sat ready to start on their journey to Mathura. Then Krishna arose, and looking deep in the eye of each, he waved his hand in farewell, and left the smile of bliss with them that filled each soul to overflowing. Then forward the restless chargers plunged, the dust rising high and quite covering the chariot. The maids stood like hewn marble still yet serene, and the cattle that grazed on the hillside turned towards the road where the chariot vanished, in their eyes a look of yearning love, while the deer on the brow of the hill, with arched neck and wild, shy glance, heaved a quick, short sigh as if hurt. And the soft breasts of the singing birds quivered, and a little sad song burst from their throats, while the trees and the flowers hung limp and wilted as if the glad life had left their hearts. A groan arose from the wild beasts in the forest, as if in the hand of death they were trapped. The sun vanished from the skies, and all nature seemed clothed with the garment of sadness. Then forth the sun burst in glorious splendor, as the joy of the smile of the Lord of love awoke in potency to bless all living things whereon it had fallen. And sweet Brindaban in silence lay, forever blessed and forever beloved, for the feet of him who was God had walked there and made holy its soil. Chapter 29. And the chariot bearing Akrura, Rama, and Krishna was followed close by the carts bearing Nanda and the Gopas, who carried gifts for the king Kamsa, to whom all must present the best of their store. On reaching the banks of the Jamna, Krishna and Rama in sportiveness descended from the chariot and dipped in the sacred waters of the river, then ascended again to the chariot, whereat Akrura the ambassador had a dip in the water too, reciting the sacred texts in the meanwhile, when lo, in the waters where he stood, he beheld the laughing Krishna and Rama sitting in the lap of the god of water. Amazed and bewildered he gazed towards the chariot, where last he had seen the brothers, and there they sat talking as when he had left them. Again he dipped his head neath the waves of the water, and again he saw Rama and Krishna, and knew that his senses were not deluded. Krishna, though seemingly a youth with all a youth's sportiveness and play, yet was the Lord incarnate. And near the cart Akrura looked in the eyes of Krishna, where the wisdom that created the universe lay, and answered the questioning gaze thus: Lord, none is there as wonderful as thou art. All hast thou created, and in thee is all creation. All have I seen that there is to see. And the chariot proceeded towards Mathura. Chapter 30. Noon reigned in the city of Mathura, when the chariot bearing the two sons of Vasudeva entered that city. The fame of the deeds and the beauty of Rama and Krishna was known in all that kingdom, and their coming to partake of its celebrations and to participate in the sports and wrestling at the command of Kamsa the king had been heralded all over the land. And the populace was glad and knew not why, and they said in their hearts, Krishna the youth, the wonderful youth of Vrindavan, will grace our land by his coming. So the streets were crowded to welcome him there, and the tops of the houses were flowered with the bright faces of women who gazed from there to catch the first glance of him whom rumor had crowned the most glorious youth of the then known world. O beauty, how potent art thou, O conqueror of all, that winneth the heart of the lowliest child, and enslaveth the heart of the proud queen of the world, that slaketh the thirst of the parched soul, and tutoreth the dullest mind, never quickened by thought. So, mid blare of trumpets and with banners unfurled, the Lord of Love entered Mathura, and above the roar of the celebrations and preparations rose the murmurs and shouts of greetings from the sea of upturned faces of men, and from the canopy of sweet downcast eyes of women that thronged to see his coming. And millions of tongues repeated his name and sang his praises, and millions of souls were flooded with love, because they had looked on his face and said his name, which was as potent as his love. For his name contained himself, and those who uttered his name had him in their hearts, and lo, the world to them was complete. Majestic and vast he walked mid the worshipping people, who saw but a youth of transcendent beauty, but felt the unfathomable mystery, the unknowable grandeur, worthy to receive their deepest obeisance. Through the streets of Mathura he went, bringing light to all whereon his smile fell. And Kamsa the tyrant grew cold and grey, for he knew his doom was drawing nigh, and his sleep was disturbed by evil dreams, for he knew already the populace was welcoming him whom none could look upon but to love. End of chapter 30. Chapters 31, 32, and 33 of Sree Krishna, the Lord of Love, by Baba Premanand Bharati. Chapter 31. The next day Krishna and Rama went forth to view the capital of Mathura in all its holiday splendor. They found the gates of the palace made of pure gold and studded with jewels and crystal, the broad street of the city and the pretty parks, all luxuriant, were with rare flowers and wondrous foliage. The splendid houses all seemed clothed and beautified for the ceremonies of the bow, the symbol of the warrior's might, that were to take place that day. It chanced that a washerman passed their way, balancing upon his head the clothes and making way towards the palace with them. In a spirit of mischief, Krishna said, "Give us the clothes that you carry to Kamsa, good fellow, for in need of them are we. Give them, and more I will give unto thee." But the washerman in insolence replied, "Upstarts, who are ye to dare to aspire to wear the clothes that belong to Kamsa the Great? Never have ye seen such clothes, and unfit to even touch them are ye. Be off and back to the country from whence ye came, or I will call the guards, who by my word will throw you in chains." Krishna, with a smile and a wave of his bare hand, severed the head from the trunk of the washerman and proceeded to take the clothes. And a weaver who was passing their way helped them put on the garments, while a florist who nearby was weaving garlands for Kamsa came to Rama and Krishna and bedecked them with garlands and flowers. And thus, clad for the festivities, onward they went. But first the weaver and the florist were rewarded with great spiritual powers by Krishna, the giver of all good things to those who give unto him their love. As they proceeded on their way, a woman of great deformity came near. A parcel she held in her hands, which she guarded carefully. As close she came to Krishna, she lifted her head and gazed on his face. For a moment she stood, a smile transforming her face. Then the bowl of precious sandalwood ointment, which to the king Kamsa she carried, to Krishna she reached and said unto him, "O youth, more beautiful art thou than aught than mine eye has ever rested upon. To those who are sweet should sweetness be given. I'm a servant of King Kamsa. This fragrant unguent for him I make, but more fitted by far is its richness for thee. Oh, allow me to lay it at thy feet." Krishna looked at her deformity, then at her love-filled eyes, and putting his feet on the tips of her toes and his 2 fingers under her chin, he wrenched her form upward, and she who was known as the Tribhakra, she of 3 bends, was a hunchback no more, but tall and straight was she, and her face never lost the beauty it bore when it looked on the face of Krishna as she offered to anoint him with zeal and love. And from that day forth she was known as the most surpassingly beautiful woman in all that land. Thus love for Krishna creates a charm that grows into beauty and never more fades. Thus all day long he wandered about, healing the sinful, the sick, and the dying by the very breath of his passing. And to sorrowing fathers and mothers that clay long-lost sons were restored, and even the dead were brought to life, and were seen with the eye, and felt with the heart, and encircled with the arms of those whose hearts were empty for them. And thus the Lord with benign smile brought to all the gifts of life and love, and none were there in all that land who felt not the power thereof. Chapter 32. When the hour for the festivities of the bow began, spectators innumerable filled the galleries and platforms of the amphitheatre. By every tongue the praise of Krishna's beauty was sung, and all awaited with eager desire the arrival of the brothers Rama and Krishna. In the center of the arena a platform was raised, where Kamsa the king and his ministers were enthroned. His eyes were lurid with hate and his heart quaking with fear, for his dreams had been full of evil omens, and he knew that he of all that multitude was out of tune with nature. For Krishna the youth had scattered flowers of love in that city for all who chose to partake of them, and all hearts had gathered them eagerly. Only he alone had turned from the good and abided by his hate, and he knew in spite of the wrestlers and the wild elephant and even the guard that stood ready to slay at his command that the youth would conquer as he ever had, and that he would die by his hands sooner or later. For had it not been writ thus, and again had not every attempt of his to put out the life of the 8th child of Devaki been baffled in marvelous ways, and still the youth lived and smiled, surely he was Hari, the invincible. His hate betrayed him and was hourly leading him into a trap. It charmed him like a subtle snake, while it frightened him like a huge wild beast. Yet gladly would he have opened the valve that held his wrath, and flooded all with its poison, if by so doing he might have annihilated that glorious youth who stood ever before him by night and day, and smote his cruel heart as with a glowing rod. So all his stolid self-possession was gone as he looked on, when Krishna the beautiful, soft as a delicate woman, yet invincible as unconquered strength, walked mid the hysterically joyous shouts of the people to where the giant bow was guarded by warriors bold. A moment, and then he seized the bow and held it aloft with one hand, the bow that 12 men of mighty strength alone could handle, and with a twist of his wrist it fell at their feet broken in twain. The guards rushed forward as if to strike him low, but when near him they stopped and looked at his glory. They crouched low on their haunches and fell on their faces, unable to move, for the life had gone out of their bodies by the first wave of his hand. But blessed were they, for none died by the hand of Krishna, but by him was made pure, and straightway to the realms of bliss they were sent. For where the hand of Krishna rested, whether to bring life or take life away, that man forever holy was made by the touch. So also with Kamsa it was, dwelling constantly on Krishna, even though in hate he came closer to love than he himself knew. So the celebration of the bow ended in triumph for Krishna and Rama, and though Kamsa sent a body of well-armed soldiers to apprehend them, lo, the conquerors victorious walked from the arena, followed by the cheers of the worshipping populace, who saw that in strength they were invincible, even as in beauty they were incomparable, and they looked forward eagerly to the morrow, when the brothers were to participate in wrestlings and sports. But Rama and Krishna returned to spend the night with the Gopas, while the people of Mathura neither ate nor slept, but sang of their beauty and might. Chapter 33. But Kamsa was troubled by the triumph of the brothers, and next morning called the wrestlers who were to match the two brothers, and again put to them the weight of the contest, and placed armed men at the gates of the arena. He then proceeded with many forebodings to the amphitheatre, where the sports were to take place. He took his seat amid the beating of drums, the blaring of trumpets, and the waving of banners. Already many spectators had assembled, among them many crowned chiefs, Brahmins, and Kshatriyas, all with expectancy overwhelming as to the outcome of the wrestling. Forward the wrestlers came with a rush, and stood in the center of the ring, wrestlers whose fame was known throughout all the land for their brute strength and skill. Few there were who dared to meet these men, and as Krishna and Rima came forward to see the meeting of the first pair, they found a huge elephant posted there at the entrance. Krishna, seeing this, asked the driver to make way with the beast for him. At this the rider urged the infuriated beast towards him. With a smile, Krishna grasped with his soft little hand the nose of the furious beast, who with a bellow fell to the ground, lifeless, dragging the driver down with him. Krishna then tore the tusks from the brute's head, and Rama and Krishna entered the resting grounds with the tusks in their hands and blood stained from the slaying of the beast. Kamsa's heart sank at the sight, and even the wrestlers recoiled in terror at the blood-stained figures who gazed on them with supernatural power in their youthful eyes. Yet true to the command of Kamsa, Chanur, the chief of the wrestlers, cried, "Come, ye youngsters, good wrestlers are ye. The good king hath invited you to participate in the contest, so come and wrestle and give pleasure to King Kamsa, he who is the greatest of all kings and men." With a smile, all-wise, Krishna looked at the wrestlers, then with eye aslant he gazed on Kamsa, who trembled at the look, and answered Chanur thus, "Though subjects of King Kamsa, yet only boys of the forest are we, unlearned in the art of wrestling. Therefore we pray you, match us with boys of our age, and not with men whose muscles are iron, and whose hearts are bold as a lion's. If we are to meet men like these, unfair is the game, and unjust, and we decline the arrangement." Then Chanur became insolent because of the confession of Krishna, which he thought was made in weakness, and cried, "O thou who hast killed the furious elephant as if in sport, thou askest to be matched with one of thine own age. With me thou shalt wrestle, me the most powerful, the strongest man of the age, and Rama shall match with Mushtik, and be it just or unjust, fair or unfair, thee I will fight, and fight to kill." And so a combat began between the man that was mortal and the youth that was God. The man, a giant, was of colossal brute force, of stature great, with muscles all knotted and crooked as the boughs of an oak tree of many years' growth, and the boy, smooth as a sweet maiden, all curved with grace, smilingly awaited the onslaught. Forward the wrestler came with the snort of a wild bull to meet the boy, who, calm and serene, smiled in his eye. The people arose and sprang from their benches and hissed, and threw their headgear and staffs into the ring as they shouted, "Give up, the fight is unfair." "Oh, shame!" they cried, "coward and beast, put a stop to the slaughter," on seeing the seemingly unequal fight. Several times Chanur struck furious blows at the fair, slight body of Krishna the youth, but provoked naught but a smile from him, while beads of blood sprang to the brow and arms of Chanur, and his huge legs trembled and broke at the knee as he tried to reach the belt of him who, after several circles about the ring, seized Chanur by the arms, and lifting him high above his head to the wonderment of the crowd, dashed him down to the ground as a playing child doth throw the pebbles. And the wrestler breathed his last with a yearning look of love in his eyes, as they rested on him whom a moment before he beheld with hate. And Rama, too, victorious was. But when Krishna stood and faced the mass of people there, they shouted and cheered with mad delight, and jumped on the railings in panic wild. "He is more than human, he is God. Come down to earth, it is he for whom the world hath waited. He will free our land from oppression. Hari is he, the invincible. Almighty art thou, and possessest in thy frame the forces of all the universe." But Kamsa the king, full of terror and rage, cried, "Ho guards, seize him and take him to the outskirts of my kingdom and drive him into banishment. Imprison Nanda and Yasoda, confiscate all their lands and belongings, and take from the Gopas their wealth and goods, and drive them from Vrindaban. Kill Devaki and Vasudeva, who are now imprisoned in my dungeon. Kill all who know and love this youth, 'tis my command." A moment Krishna gazed on Kamsa, then with a bound he reached the platform where Kamsa stood with sword unsheathed. O Kamsa, I am the 8th son of Devaki, whom thou so long hast sought to slay. It is writ that thou by my hand must die. O king, dost thou think that human hand can turn aside the force of the law? And hurling Kamsa down on the ground, he leaped over the prostrate king, whereat his life departed. But his glazed eyes were fixed on him, whose hand had blessed even him by its touch, and burned away every sin from his soul. Then hastening through the lines of guards, who prostrated low at his approach, he went to where his father and mother were imprisoned in dungeons dark and deep. Lo, he bent to their feet, murmuring in accents sweet, O parents mine, O much have ye suffered for my sake, and all ye shall gain through me, for in me is all there is to gain, and outside of me there is naught. From thy womb, O Devaki, I was born, yet out of me thou didst come. I prostrate before thee. Then saluting them both, mid deafening cheers, he led them forth to the palace, and the father of Kamsa, dethroned by his son, received and welcomed them there. And wild was the joy of the populace on that day, that Krishna lifted the yoke of bondage from them, and they blessed the hour that the sun had ushered in that day, which brought a new ruler in their land. And already Mathura felt the joy that was but a forerunner of a perfect reign, for Krishna it was who placed on the throne the one who would rule the land in goodness and plenty. End of chapter 33.